Peace to everyone. Got rid of that Stahetki facial hair that was bugging me for a few days. It was even worse about 20 minutes ago than it was in my last video. So I'm going to teach you guys about facts. What is a fact? What is truth? Okay. What is evidence? Okay. What is an eyewitness testimony? Things like that. And there's a purpose behind this. I'm aiming this specifically, well, anybody watching, to be honest, because anybody can gain from this, but specifically towards my Muskogee brothers and sisters who don't understand how facts and truth actually work, because there's a lot, unfortunately, who fall in this category. And I'm not saying that to belittle anybody, to insult anybody, to offend anybody, only to educate. This is constructive criticism, okay? And I want you guys to understand this, because there's a time in my life where I didn't understand the value of a primary source. I could just say, oh, well, so-and-so said this, and therefore, or I read this on the internet, and therefore it must be true, okay? That's not how it actually works, okay? What did you read on the internet? Who posted it? What are their sources, okay? And if you have these answers, then you know how credible the source may or may not actually be, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate something for you guys, okay? See what I just did there? I just dropped what I'm claiming to be a spoon that I'm claiming to have carved myself with this Beavercraft wood carving kit. Got the little knife here, got the spoon hook knife. I've been using what I claim to be a strop, which has leather on one side, maple on the other. I'm claiming that it's maple. I know that it's maple because I bought maple. This used to be part of a longer cricket stick that I made for a Halloween costume for Casey Jones back in 2014. Casey Jones from the Ninja Turtles, right? So I cut it down eventually. I made something that is useful that I'm not going to ever probably get rid of. I might even add an extra piece on the back and, you know, basically, okay, strop one side, strop the other side, keep it nice and sharp, okay? So that's basically how you want to keep your knife sharp. You can do the same thing with the other one. It's a little bit trickier because it is in the shape of a hook. But based upon the evidence that I'm showing you right now, this knife carving set, the fact that I've got some incomplete, you know, this thing's got some Celtic knotwork on it that I'm trying to carve out. This is one I just said, you know what, I'm going to rough this one out. Did that this morning, okay? Got another spoon. This is actually white oak. And I'm going to do a bunch of other carvings on it to, you know, some type of knotwork pattern, some rope pattern, okay? But the fact that I have all these tools and I have these other unfinished copies in front of me should act as evidence that my claim that I carved this myself is actually true. Now, if you have someone else who can say, no, I know somebody else that did this. James just got his hands on this from them and is now claiming this stuff. He bought the tools after the fact or even before the fact, but didn't use them himself because I saw somebody else do that, okay? Well, then you got to provide some type of eyewitness testimony. Otherwise, my claim is going to be accepted. 99.9% probability that it's true, okay? Now, especially if I were to carve my initials, you know, my name and date this thing, that acts as an additional proof that I am, in fact, the artist who crafted it, okay? These are important principles, okay? I'm demonstrating some very basic stuff. I mean, seriously, guys, okay? This just hit this, okay? You guys saw it. Now, if somebody asks you, hey, did you ever see James Satterley drop a piece of wood onto another piece of wood in a video that he claims was one was a spoon unfinished and the other one was a strop that was finished, made from something else? Did you see that video? You say, oh yeah, I saw that video. Yeah, I can testify that I saw him do that on video. And now you're an eyewitness. You have eyewitness testimony. You saw the video footage. Now, granted, they're going to go straight to the video footage in a court of law and say, oh, yes, James Satterley definitely did that, okay? So they're going to want to see the video. Otherwise, you're gonna see, it's gonna appear to be secondhand because you watched a video of it, right? They're kind of tricky like that. You know, if you're in person, say, "Oh, I was right next to him when it happened," you know, that's different. Or I was right next to the other person that actually did the work, and James was just standing there watching it happen, and the guy handed the stuff to him, or whatever, right? You know, you need some eyewitness testimony to contradict this video's claims. Okay, all right. I'm holding in my hands right now what alleges to be the 1832 Creek Census, Parson Abbott, by James L. Dethat, and I'm pretty sure I'm 100% confident that the original one did not have this historical image of a Muskogee guy with these big fat hoop earrings and weird looking shaved head with what looks like horns on a headband. Definitely not my cup of tea, but it's an historical image, right? But it wasn't part of this originally. Okay, I've looked at actual handwritten copies of some of the pages. They weren't hand typed like this, but this is a hand typed copy of, well, this purports to be a hand typed copy of the Parson Abbott roll. Okay. And it has the names of individuals and the towns they belong to. It has the first number, like Tuskimiha is person number one at Tukachachcha town. And this is for the so-called principal chiefs of this town, in which case there's 20 principal chiefs of that town. The first guy, Tuskimiha. So there's 0, 1, 0, 1, 10, and 12, okay? It's a fact that those numbers are following the name. Now, it's being purported here that the first number is number of males, second number is number of females, third is number of slaves, and fourth is the total number of people, okay? Now, Tuskimiha there's one man in the household, I'm assuming it's him, one woman, I'm assuming it's his wife, 10 slaves, equaling a total of 12 people, or 12 persons, okay? And let's see. I mean, when you get into these principal chiefs, some of them don't have, like, no slaves, okay? Like, some of them have like, more slaves than free persons in the home. Some have, like, 0 slaves. It's all just their own family members, right? Presumably. Purportedly, right? I mean, heck, it could be, like, friends living in their household. I don't know, okay? Because here's the problem. Here's the fact of the matter. The fact is this. You got the name of one person, obviously the head of household. In fact, if you look at the letters surrounding this roll, you will find that, yeah, they're listing heads of household. And they're debating if a woman is free and she's married to a slave, is she listed as head of household or is he? You know, things like that. If someone's a free person of color or the white husband or wife or the white spouse of an Indian, do we count them as being citizens? Like things like that all get hashed out as part of this equation. So you're going to have people on this list that are not even Indians, but they're like the spouses of Indians. Now, you may not have their actual like name for the most part. Sometimes it'll mention so-and-so, a Yuchi Indian, right? I have to go through this one. I know that some rolls will show, it'll say a Negro or something like that, or parentheses colored, right? Things like that. And that way it's pretty clear that this person is not an Indian, okay? So it's also a fact that I need to go through this entire thing and get the entire list of how many men, how many women, and how many slaves are actually on this Parson Abbott roll for each town. I need to go ahead and do that because I think that's relevant to the conversation of whether or not the freedmen actually were on the Trail of Tears, because there's debate about that. They're saying, oh, well, for sure my ancestors were on the Trail of Tears. They were for sure a part of Ogiapofa. Well, how do you know that? How do you know that Hickory Ground was their tribal town? Do you know that for sure? Because look, I'm having a hard time as a by-blood citizen tracing all my ancestors back to the Parson Abbott roll. I could trace some of them for sure back to that. But then you get some of these Muskogee names that get recycled, and it's hard to determine who that is, right? There's several Hope Harjos that could be my ancestor, my 4th great grandfather or 5th great grandfather. Let's see, hold on a second. Yeah, 5th great grandfather. So it's hard to say. So now, if I knew for sure that he was listed on that tribal town roll at a later time period, you know, I might be able to say, okay, like, it's probably this guy back then, most likely. But even that's going to be kind of difficult to definitively say, because there's no list of children or spouses on this roll, and that is a fact, okay? It is a fact that the slaves are not being named, but neither are the spouses or the children. That is a fact, okay? And because of that fact, it's really hard to say for sure my ancestors who were slaves at the time were definitely for sure on the Trail of Tears. Okay, you can't prove that. Okay, you're gonna have a hard time proving that. All right, you need to have other supporting documentation. Now, I'm not saying that if you're a freedman and you're claiming, or you're a freedman descendant, I should say, because now you're just a citizen of the United States, right? But your ancestors were freedmen, okay? Creek freedmen. I'm not saying that you don't have ancestors that were slaves at Ogiapofa, right? But I would need to see the supporting documents on that, because if someone were to say today, hey, my ancestors back then were on, they were citizens of Ogiapofa on the Trail of Tears, I'd be like, okay, well, even if you're tribal town matrilineally, going back to the 1899 Campbell Creek Roll, going back to the 1895 and 1882 census records for those towns, even if your ancestors in the matrilineal descent go back there, even then, you may not have the absolute proof that your matrilineal ancestors were actually at Hickory Ground on the Trail of Tears. Okay, like, they may not have been with that group. Like, could they have been adopted in by the town? I don't know, right? And that's the thing. So your ancestors probably are, or probably were at that time part of that town. If you are actually a part, if that is your tribal town by matrilineal descent, you probably most likely are a descendant of those people who came on the Trail of Tears as Ogiapofa people, right? But as a by-blood citizen, it might be hard for you to prove that, okay? The burden of proof might be a little bit greater with freedmen, because freedmen, you're not going to have a head of household for the freedmen families, because they were part of the household of the master, the person that owned them. This is hard facts that have to be brought out, okay? It's not like I want to say, your people were our slaves. It's like, whatever. It sucks, right? I mean, it sucks. I mean, there's no two ways about it, okay? Slavery sucks, and, it's a black eye, no pun intended, on the legacy of our tribe. But at the same time, it's more a black eye and legacy of some families, okay? Because of I want to go down the list here to see how many. What I want to do is not only have the actual list for each tribal town of all men, all women, and all males, all females, because I believe is that what it said at the beginning? Yes, number of males, number of female, singular, interesting. So males, plural, number of female, singular, number of slaves, plural. So, all right. I'd like to actually have a list of, all of this, and also, as a secondary number, just say, okay, this is how many people actually own slaves, and this is how many people, heads of household, and therefore the rest of the people overall who did not actually own slaves, right? That's kind of an important part of the conversation, because you have a lot of freedmen who are like, act like they're owed everything by us. And I just don't think it's true. And the fact that freedom happened in 1866 for the Creek freedmen, the fact that citizenship was a part of the equation for 113 years, the fact that with the Dawes Act, they got their 120 acres of land each, including babies. There's a movie right now. I can't remember. It's about this girl, the richest girl, you know, in the country. She's a Creek freedman who struck oil. Okay, and it's a big time family type movie that is coming out. Okay, and that's Indian land right there. That's Indian territory that went to a freedman girl. Okay. Do I feel like however many generations of slavery that existed entitles them to perpetual citizenship in an Indian tribe on a land that wasn't originally belonging to their ancestors? Do you guys see what I'm saying? And I've gone over this before, but it doesn't help that you have the likes of the Miko Hokti of AI chat GPT, Melanie Fish, going on her TikTok account, apparently getting together with there's this nice tall black dude who, like, it just seems like a nice dude, and she's like, oh, just so you know, my Indian ancestors look like you. It's like, no, they did not if they were Indians. She's mixed race, she has black ancestry too, but she's trying to make it sound as if Indians look like this guy who's clearly of African descent. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe your African ancestors look like that dude, but your Indian ancestors did not. Your Indian daddy, who you claimed had white privilege, looked like an Indian, obviously, incredibly obviously, idiot. She's retarded. I'm sorry, and I personally think she's a traitor. That's my opinion. Okay, that's very heavy-handed to say, but I mean it because I think she's a traitor. I do. She can get a free pass if she gets, 5150'd, but I digress. Okay, like, in any case, though, yeah, I mean, this is the stupidity that's floating around. This is why I make these videos. Okay, it's to show you guys what facts actually are. Okay, you can look at the giant Olmec heads of Mexico and say, oh, those look like they're African. But then I've seen, like, Mexican dudes that look like those statues and who do not look African American. Okay, like, they look like they're Indian. Okay, like, once you see them in person, you see those features, it can't be unseen. Now you know for a fact that the Olmec heads are not black, they're Indians. Okay, stuff like that, guys. Okay, I'll state that as being an opinion. That's my opinion, based upon the fact that I've seen the Olmec heads and the fact that I've seen Mesoamerican guys who look just like the Olmec heads and who just do not look African American. Okay, so, so therefore it's my opinion that the Olmec heads do not actually look like Africans. Okay, I'm not alone in this opinion. Okay, let me see. So yeah, as far as evidence and proof that the freedmen actually have ancestors on who were part of Hickory Ground, right? You need to provide, it will require later documents than this, okay? For example, I mean, I'm of the opinion, and I've been of the opinion, that anyone who can prove Indian ancestry, like Muskogee Indian ancestry, before the final Dawes, but like after the Trail of Tears, after the old settlers. So those of us who came to Oklahoma, not those who stayed behind, but those who came to Oklahoma, if any of them have descendants who later became mislabeled as freedmen, right? But the ancestors were actual Indians who intermixed. Those descendants should be listed as Indians by blood, even if the final Dawes says otherwise. So if you can go back to 1882 or 1895 or 96 rolls, you should be able to, I think personally, we should amend the Constitution to allow those alleged freedmen who can trace back to a living ancestor who is on those other rolls. And not just a living ancestor. I mean, look, my great-great-grandmother had a daughter named Janetta Knight. Now, on the 1882 Arbica roll, they're listed in the father's household. The wife is too, right? And she's listed as Janetta Knight. You look at the Greenleaf roll, and they're in the household of a man named Hodolgaji. And I'm assuming he must be an uncle of some kind, a clan uncle or something along those lines. And the girl's listed as being Jonarty, not Janetta, but Jonarty. Same age. The name sounds similar, and it's the same, like the other siblings are there. Or rather, the oldest half-sibling, Giniarji, was on both rolls. On the same roll in both towns. And it says on Greenleaf that her mother, herself, and her sister Jonarty were paid at Arbica. Therefore, it stands to reason that when you see Giniarji in the household of her stepfather, Jacob Knight, and Martha being listed in the household of her husband, Jacob Knight, that when you see Janetta Knight, that she's probably the same person as Jonarty, given the similar sounding first name, even though no last name was given on the Greenleaf roll, but it's the same family. It's a girl, and she's 2 years old. I believe it was 2 years old. Okay, so the fact that Sally was not listed there means that she wasn't born yet. So if she was born in 1882, it was after these rolls were taken, which means when her daughter was born in early 1900, she would have still been at the oldest 17. Okay, just saying. All right. So, and that's not a slight on her, because 16 was the age of adulthood in the tribe at that time. I mean, I know that the law was trying to say, oh no, you got to be 18 and, whatever. But, well, by the time that my great-grandma Effie was, marrying at the age of 14, the law, you had to be 18, I believe. And even if it was 16, it's like she wasn't 16 yet. So she lied and said she was 18. Okay. Now, that's the funny part, is it is a fact that on the marriage license, she puts herself down as being 18. It is a fact that Sally's name isn't mentioned, I believe, as a witness. The reality is different, though. You see, I have the oral tradition from my great-aunt Darlene, may she rest in peace, that she gave me the name of the friend. But there was a friend of Sally's that claimed to be Sally, at the wedding, and really wasn't Sally. What I was told, this comes from my mom and from her mom, the older sister of Aunt Darlene, was that at 14 years old, Effie ran off with Bruce. They got married, and then what happens is when Sally found out, she called the cops and had her now son-in-law arrested for marrying her underage daughter. Now, he was in jail, and Effie says, Mama, I love him. No, 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 no. And she's like, okay, well, fine. You made your bed. You sleep in it. And then that was it. He got released. She dropped charges. Okay. So, that tradition substantiates what Aunt Darlene had told me separately. So, which would mean that the actual documentation is wrong. Okay. It's true that that Effie and Bruce got married and that she claimed that she was 18. It's not true that she actually was 18. And other documents prove that. Okay. So documents could be in error sometimes. Okay. You can have multiple spellings of the exact name on this roll right here. Okay. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but like Harjo, for example, is spelled in a couple different ways. Yeah, it's spelled a couple different ways. And Harjo, the J shouldn't even be a part of the spelling, because it'd be Hajo. Okay? It is a fact that Southerners would say, ha, Joe. Ha, like, suh. So the R is like an right? And so it's most likely that one of these guys, I have to look at to verify it though. Maybe one of these guys was a Southerner. And so Hajo or Hajo became Hajo, which became Harjo. Okay, I've covered this before. So yeah, if you're trying to prove your ancestry back to Chief Benjamin Perryman, and I'm addressing John Perryman in this situation, and anyone who's a Perryman descendant who happens to be a freedman who claims ancestry back to the Perryman, the actual by blood Perrymans. Okay, you need to have documentation to prove that this was a child that was accepted. Now, it is a fact that David M. Hodge, maternal grandson of David McKillop, Reverend David McKillop, and Mary Susan Perryman, who was the daughter of Benjamin Perryman, that he did a signed sworn affidavit where he mentions his grandparents by name. These are my grandparents, and this is a document that supports this is a proof of my ancestry. Okay, so I'm not descended from David M. Hodge, but I'm descended from his first cousin, James Madison McKillop. Okay, his maternal first cousin. Okay, but this signed sworn affidavit it does support my claims as far as having a proof with letters and documentation to prove my lineage back to Benjamin Perryman. That's one of the documents that helps prove it. Okay, but he's claiming that David McKillop had no other children. Well, here's the problem with that. It's purported that he had a child by his niece by marriage. So that, in other words, his wife's niece, he purportedly got pregnant with a child. He didn't claim the child. Okay. There's a woman named Julie Hearn who claims to be descended from that child. Okay. I think she claims from that child. No, hold on a second. That might be where her claim comes from. Because she's claiming McKillop ancestry, and she provides some documentation. Basically, there's, I think, like Pleasant Porter, if I'm not mistaken, and some others who are Perryman descendants. Or there's other, family members who supported the claim that David McKillop was the father of the child. Now, does that definitively prove that the paternity? No. But it's evidence when he has blood relatives that say, yeah, this is his kid. Or at least, in this case, some are blood relatives, some are in-law relatives, because he himself was not a Perryman. David McKillop was married to a Perryman, okay? So it's proof that people accept that he had a child out of wedlock with one of their nieces or cousins or daughters, whatever. It is not proof that it actually was his child. You need a paternity test for that, okay? Or at the very least, some type of recognition, or yes, I am the father of the child, right? Some type of affidavit proving that, okay? So you need those things to act as actual evidence and proof. So these type of documents are what's going to prove your ancestry, okay? You can't do that if you don't have the records. You can't prove this stuff. And you're going to need these type of documents if you're, for example, a freedman who's trying to prove that your ancestors were at Hickory Ground on the Trail of Tears. So you're going to need that, or some type of journals, some type of documents that, even if they weren't official documents, that the purpose of these documents, even as a personal family journal, were to record the memoirs of your life. Okay. You need that to prove your claim, okay? If you want to prove your legitimate Perryman lineage back to Benjamin Perryman, you need to have documentation to prove that. Otherwise, you're just believing what you read on the internet or what your dad says he found, and he hasn't given you the documents. And the documents might be nothing more than crap he printed up off the internet. Now, I'll admit, when I found out that I was a descendant, it's because of the internet. But I also found out, I also was able to find records that proved it. So it's not just something that people on the internet were saying was true. There's actual proof of this. So that's where documents come in. Okay. So I want y'all to think about that. What is truth? Okay. Did David McKillop sire a bastard child by his niece by marriage, or did he not? Is his grandson David M. Hodge actually telling the truth? I didn't know why David M. Hodge even did that affidavit in the first place, but now I know why. Because there is a child that people are claiming was his grandfather's child. Because he was saying that he never had children with anyone other than his wife, like something along those lines. And it's like, oh, well, now we're hearing otherwise. So he wanted to protect the good name of his beloved grandfather, obviously, that he himself was named after, David M. Hodge, David McKillop Hodge, right? So I get it. But on the flip side, like, other relatives are backing up the claim of this child. And so then again, did they have a beef with a good reverend and say, oh yeah, well, I don't like him. He was our in-law anyway. He's a jerk. So we're going to recognize this girl's claim as being his child because we want him to be guilty. Do you have people like that in the world? Absolutely. Now, are the Perryman descendants, those individuals? I don't know about that. I tend to think that maybe he actually did have a child out of wedlock, just because there's so many people that slap their name onto that other, like, sworn statement. So that's kind of what I tend to think. But, I'm open to the possibility that he might be totally innocent of the accusations. Okay. It can go either way for me, but I'm kind of leaning more towards that was his kid, just because so many relatives were backing up the claim. Okay. That even though the good reverend was already dead at the time, I mean, who knows? If he'd lived past the early 1840s, maybe he would have recognized the kid eventually. I don't know, but he didn't. And so, it is what it is. If she's telling all of her family, no, it was David McKillop, he's the daddy, and they're like, what? Right? And so then there's this child born who is a Perryman descendant, by the way, because of through the mother, but now has, like, McKillop ancestry, allegedly, right? And this is where DNA kind of comes in. If DNA can prove this descendancy, right, connected with other McKillop descendants, well, that would be nice. That could actually prove the claims are true. Okay. But then again, it's so far back at this point that it may not be that easy to pin down with current DNA science. Okay. With current molecular biology, we may have some time to go until we can do that. Because getting beyond 6 to 8 generations, or even getting that far back and proving for sure that it's a blood relative, sometimes could be tricky. So, and just to further prove things, look into the alleged descendants of Joseph Smith through all the other women. None of these kids were his, by the way. None of those kids, they all belong to the purported fathers. They all belong to, someone else. When you compare all the Smith DNA, all the mountains of Smith DNA that was gathered for that project, like, none of those alleged children were his. Only the ones he had by Emma. Okay. And so far, those are the facts. Okay. So I'm sorry, Mr. Herod, the good professor. Fawn Brody is not credible. She had an agenda against the church, and that's exactly why she wrote what she wrote. So she was not a credible source. So sorry, Mr. Herod, College of Muskogee Nation. I've had an argument with him online about stuff, and we don't know for sure if Sally Hemings' kids were actually Thomas Jefferson's kids. They could have been the children of his nephew, his brother, his uncle, his dad. It didn't have to be him. It could have been any one of his close blood. It could have been like these kids could have been sired by multiple male blood relatives. They may not even have the same dad, even if they all have Jefferson blood. You guys see what I'm saying? Like, it's just been accepted now that he must have been the father, but there's no proof. He never claimed that these were his kids, right? And I mean, there's enough Jeffersons floating around, male line Jeffersons floating around, Monticello, you know, or wherever else you would have been, that it stands to reason they could have been the father or fathers. Okay? We don't know. So I don't want anyone claiming to be descendants of Moses Perryman because they believe that he sired a child with a slave. If there's documents to back that up, that's a different story. But if you don't have documents and affidavits and things like that, you can't prove it. That's why these facts are important. The facts. The fact is, David M. Hodge wrote an affidavit trying to exonerate his grandfather. Okay? He made claims in this affidavit. Whether these claims are factual or not is a different story, because there's other evidence showing that maybe he wasn't correct. Anyway, look at the facts, look at the evidence, provide documentation. This is what you must do if you want to show the actual truth, especially in today's day and age. Just saying word of mouth, oh, well, it's like, well, I swear my grandmother claims that Cleopatra was black. Your grandmother was full of shit. Okay? The facts are that her ancestry, her family tree shows Macedonian Greek, inbred Macedonian Greek. There's no evidence of anything outside of Macedonian Greek ancestry in the family tree of Cleopatra, and the Macedonian Greeks were white. I'm sorry, like, your grandmother is full of crap. There's some stuff on the internet about that. My grandma swears that Cleopatra was black. I don't care what anybody says. Cleopatra was black. Well, your grandmother's wrong. Sorry. Get over it. Sorry. I'm going to go on for just another minute here. All of these false claims that the original indigenous inhabitants of the Americas were all black, and that the Welsh were originally black because they have a more swarthy appearance and curly hair, that the Irish were originally black because they have curly hair, that because of one skeleton found in Scotland that probably dates to like much later in time, maybe early Roman occupation era. It's like that must mean that the Scots were originally black too, and the Japanese samurai were all black, and because of that one guy that was brought in as a slave from Africa, who later became a samurai, and you know, he was black, therefore the samurai were all black. No, they weren't. Okay, this Afrocentric pseudo-history needs to be shut down. It needs to be shut down. We have to provide facts, okay? And now, things that were obvious to the world for hundreds, if not thousands of years, now have to be proven true because of all these false claims, okay? It's like, why can't you just love your ancestry regardless of what it is? Why do you have to, like, make it out to be something that it wasn't? Because that makes you feel more special, okay? Stop it. Just get over it. Okay? Live in reality. Okay? I know that a lot of there are leaders in the Freedmen group that are living in reality about this. Demario Solomon Simmons is not one of them because he's pushing these false ideas as well on at least two public, speeches that are recorded on video. So it's a fact that he said it on at least 2 occasions that I can verify. So, yeah. Just saying. So look at the facts. It's not about my truth and your truth. You speak your truth. No. There is no your truth. There is no my truth. There is the truth. That is it. And what the truth is has to be figured out sometimes. And you need facts. Facts and evidence. But facts to build up the real story of what's actually true. Okay, and that's it. That's it. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll talk to y'all later. Mido for watching, and Haram Chichaklis.